This is going to be my first time doing a full custom hardline liquid cooled loop. And if I look a little bit nervous, it's definitely because I am. I'm absolutely no stranger to custom cooling. I've done some softline builds before. You can actually see these in the top right corner of your screen. But when it comes to actually cutting and bending hardline, I've seen it being done, but I've never actually done it myself. As you can probably tell, we are going pretty big here today. I think this is actually the biggest case I've built in years. This is brand new from Corsair. It's the 7000D. But this video has actually been really helpfully sponsored by both Gigabyte and AMD. So we're going for X570, a Ryzen processor, and a Radeon 6800 non-XT. This is going to be perfect for high refresh rate 1440p. But if you're wondering the inevitable question, which is why we're not going for a 6900 XT, well, it's because there's a graphics card shortage and this was the only one AMD had to loan me. Well, at least that's their official story. Maybe they just don't trust me with water and £1,000 graphics cards. I've definitely never broken one of those before. Oh no! X570 is of course pretty much the most feature-rich gaming platform that you can get right now. Obviously there are others out there, but this is the only mainstream platform that does actually have PCIe Generation 4 support on all of the slots from the chipset as well, rather than just the CPU. It's really interesting, however, because Gigabyte are actually about to refresh their X570 series with some brand new boards that don't actually have a chipset fan at all. It's definitely something that I guess a lot of us would rather do without, and all of their new boards that they're bringing out actually won't have a chipset fan at all, which is pretty cool. As you would probably expect, we're not using a Ryzen 5 5600X for this. We're actually using a Ryzen 9 5900X, which means we're getting 12 cores, which is going to be brilliant for someone like myself that wants to do some 6K multicam video editing, but then also play games without losing out on single core performance. Obviously, we will not be needing a CPU cooler, but we will need to remove the stock mounting hardware because we are, of course, going to be fitting a CPU block. This is from Corsair. It's the Hydra X range. This is the XC7. Said with such certainty, but in my defense, I've used this before and I've thrown the box away. How much thermal paste do we need to use? I think this is going to be about right, actually. Nice little X. Then the easiest CPU cooler install you will ever do, you just put these on and then screw it in. We have a cloth and the brand new Royale RAM from G-Skill. So this is the Trident Z. But if you have a look at it, it's very shiny. It's actually got like a crystalline effect on the top and then this cool almost diamond cut mesh on the side. It looks really neat. This is 32 gigabytes of 3600 megahertz RAM, which is pretty much what you'd want to go for, I guess, if you're after the best looking and best performing PC. The only real downside is that if you do want to upgrade to 64 gigabytes, you'd have to get a whole new set and replace the lot. As far as storage is concerned, this is actually something that is completely new to me as well, and I would wager new to you. This is actually a water-cooled SSD, which makes sense for our custom loop. It is made by Corsair. It is the MP600 Pro, 2 terabytes of Gen 4 storage, hooked up to a custom liquid-cooled loop via Hardline. Pretty hardcore. Okay, that is definitely quite big actually. It does say Corsair on it, if I have it up the right way. I mean, it's not obscene, but when you think the SSD is just this tiny slither at the bottom, most of that is actually a water-cooled block. All of these companies are trusting me not to break anything, and I don't trust myself. Come on, PC Centric, be confident, you can do it. The people are counting on you. Or maybe they just want this to end up in Reddit fails. I know you're thinking it. No, no. So here is our finished board then, and I don't know about you, but I'm thinking that the theming is working pretty well. The RAM sort of goes with the accents that we've got. We've got silver and black. But obviously once we sort of spice this up with some RGB, we'll probably go for like a AMD red sort of vibe. I'm thinking it's going to look pretty good. This is the 7000D from Corsair, and it is probably bigger and heavier than I am. Not that that's actually particularly difficult, but obviously it is very similar to the 4000 and 5000D from Corsair, but it is just a lot bigger, it's a lot more scaled up. This case is actually so big you could fit 3 140 fans at the front and at the top. So if you want to do, what is that, a 420 radiator at the top and the bottom, I think you can do that. Why they didn't put this on the other Corsair cases, I don't know. A door. As you'd expect, it is very similar to the 5000D, just scaled up a little bit. So by that I mean you can actually have fans or radiators or disc plates or things here or at the front, and then you've got ample cooling at the top as well. For a case that is actually this expensive though, you would probably expect that they'd give you better fans as standard than these. It's not that they'd be terrible or anything, but you're spending an awful lot of money. In terms of the fans that we're upgrading to, we're going for some SP RGB Elites. They don't make much noise, they still look pretty good despite not having all of the RGB effects in the world. And if you are going to be kitting a case like this out with fans, this is definitely going to save you quite a lot of money. I'm installing this bottom one pretty much business as normal, like a fan, but then the two above it, I'm going to fit my first radiator, which is going to be a 280. I've used this one before, and like a lot of the things I'll be using today, there is definitely a little bit of purple discoloring, but we're going to use red fluid, so hopefully it shouldn't be an issue. T-shirt change because it's a new day. I have no idea if that's going to flow into what I filmed a few days ago, but we're just going to go with it. So the top and front radiators are in, and then this is the bit where it just takes a long time to properly plan out what you're going to do, because while obviously I've still got to put the motherboard inside, I'm essentially trying to work out where all of the tubes are going to go and what the easiest and best looking route is going to be. Because realistically, this is the first time, as I say, that I've done this. I don't want to try and do anything too complicated because it's just going to upset me, frankly. So what I'm thinking at the moment is we're going to use the extra space of this case to our advantage and just try and make everything as simple as possible. At the top, I'm thinking of using 90-degree fittings and not really having any bends at all because I can just connect these radiators up pretty easily, to be honest. But then everything below that, I want to be quite visual. I mean, I want to do some bending. That's pretty much the point of this video, right? Remember that this is a hard tube, and every time you bend this, you do actually risk breaking it. So what you really don't want to do is have so many bends that you, let's say, get the first two right, but then the third one you muck up. You would have to do this whole tube again, which would not only be very frustrating, but quite expensive, and I don't actually have that much tube. Oh, what have I signed up for? Let's continue our build though by plopping our motherboard into place. This bit feels so easy compared to the rest of it. This will probably give you an idea of the scale of this case now when you actually see a motherboard in relation to everything else. There's definitely a lot of space here. You could maybe put additional fans all down the side. You could put like a fancy reservoir that has some fancy effects and then sort of run it all the way down. You could do multiple loops, one for the GPU, one for the CPU. The possibilities, I wouldn't say endless, but they can't be that far off. I'm going to get a load of people commenting that my build is going to be too empty, but it's my first time doing it. Cut me some slack. Or I suppose you can't do that, can you? Because we're using Hardline, not soft. That's the worst joke I've ever made. We are going to get all of the cables in place. As this is an AMD build, we're using these lovely braided red cables from Corsair. The power supply that we're using is 850 watts. This is my RM850i that Corsair sent me years ago. It is actually a little bit out of date, but you can find a newer one. So if you're interested in current pricing on any of these parts, you can actually find it with my Amazon affiliate links listed down below. Now, this is the bit in the process where things do start to get a little bit scary, especially if you've never done it before. So this is our air-cooled graphics card. It is actually fairly quiet under full load, but quiet for an air-cooled graphics card is still quite loud. So we do want to go ahead and put a water block on it. This is the RX edition of the XG7 RGB. So this is definitely the bit where you're going to need to put your big girl or big boy pants on. The block itself is the most recent revision. The main changes really are that you do have this little Dominator Platinum style effect on the top, which would be great if you're going for Dominator RAM. And then they have also tightened up the tolerances as well. So the chances of anything leaking is reduced. I'm not sure I'm selling that very well, am I? The chances of everything leaking and breaking your £3,000 PC is reduced. The good thing with the AMD reference cards is that they do quite helpfully use standard Phillips crossheads, so to actually get this cooler apart is a lot easier. You don't need hex screws or anything funny like that. So there is the back plate removed. If I'm sounding confident at this stage, it's because this is in my repertoire. I have done this before and it's not actually too bad. Hang on a minute, if you're one of these people that has a phobia of holes, look at that. That's making me feel sick. This final bit is what I would describe as the point of no return. Not because you can't reverse what you've done, but because once you pierce through this sticker here, you have voided your warranty. Couple of wires to detach. Oh, I have officially broken that. Sorry, AMD. I can fairly easily resolder and fix it, but it is just the RGB for the cooler that we're not going to use. But please do be aware, the RGB on the 6800 is very prone to breaking. But anyway, mild calamity aside, here we have our 6800 in its full bare bones glory. We have the GPU in the middle that does all of those calculations. We've got the memory all the way around the outside, and then we've got VRMs that controls all of the different voltages that actually makes all of this work. We give the card a quick cleanup with some thermal interface remover. Pick up the card and just gently push this down on top so that it lines up with all of those holes. Grab the back plate, lay this on top. The reason that it's this straightforward is because Corsair have actually pre-applied all of the thermal material and all of the thermal pads that you need. The only caveat is that you can't really move this block to a completely different card, but to be fair, you can't really do that anyway. It's definitely worth noting that you could put this in a vertical GPU mount, and then you'd have it looking something along the lines of this, which actually I think would look better. However, because this is a PCI Generation 4 graphics card, I don't actually have a Gen 4 riser. Nice and easily. There's just something about black and white builds that just sparkle. Or maybe it's the RAM. No, it's the black and red that looks good. The daunting bit begins now, actually getting the loop to work. And some of these I think are going to be quite simple, because if you look at the graphics card straight into the SSD, that's a fairly easy run. Going from the SSD into the block, not quite so easy, because we sort of have to do a U round, but I think we can get that working okay. I do think the runs to the radiators should be okay. From the block into the radiator, again, okay. It's more a case of where we're actually going to put this pump, because we can mount it to the radiator quite easily. So we can either have it anywhere along here, but my original plan was to actually drop it in at the bottom, because I think that will probably look the neatest. The issue, however, is that the fill port is located on the top, so we can't use this to actually be part of our loop. We need to keep this free. So the issue by putting it down here is that essentially you're going to have both of these coming up and out, which might get a little bit more complicated than it needs to. So I have indeed fitted the pump down here. It's very easy to mount it. You can put it on a radiator or just fit it into a fan mount with some bolts. Very, very simple. This isn't going anywhere. What we've got here is a simple 90-degree fitting on a ball valve. This is currently turned off, and of course it will remain turned off until we're trying to drain it. And then we can just hook up a bit of soft line, run it over the edge of the desk into a bucket or something, open it up, and then just lift the case, and then gravity should do pretty much all of the work for us. In terms of the fixtures and fittings that we're using, I actually ran out of chrome fittings, which in the end has turned into a good thing, because I want this to be like a black, silver and red theme, as we've talked about before. And I really like the look of these chrome fittings for the Hardline, mixed with the 90-degree adapters, but in black. So we've got a mixture of black and chrome going on here. Now comes the time to actually start cutting and bending some tubes. The kit that we're using to achieve this is actually also sold by Corsair. They've sent this one out as well. It is the XT Hardline Bending Kit, but you should note that while this has everything you need to cut tubes, it doesn't have everything you need to bend it, because you also need a heat gun. Fortunately, Amazon exists, and I've ordered a Bosch Easy Heat 500. Inside the box, you get this little clamping tool so you can actually keep everything steady. You've got this little silicone inside tube thing, and you use this so that you can actually bend the tube without warping the middle. You've got this little chamfer tool so you can clean up all of your cuts. You've got a bend guide so you can get nice clean 90-degree bends. And then finally, you also have the hacksaw. Definitely not the most premium one I've ever used. This is actually all plastic other than the metal blade, but it should be more than good enough to actually get our Hardline rig up and running. The silicone bit goes in the end then, being careful not to push it in all the way through. You then grab your heat gun, you'd lay it out on a flat surface. We're going to start with this bottom tube because it's probably the one that matters the least, because it doesn't matter where the bend actually appears, and it will give me a little bit of practice. So I roughly want there to be a 90-degree, probably about here-ish. Then we will begin the heating. I want to try and keep this in one straight line, but make sure we are heating up the tube nice and evenly. So what I've done there is essentially cock it up. But we can do that freehand. And there we have a bend. Didn't go to plan, but it's my first go. Then you'll just put this on it. Then you open up one of these fittings. Do not lose the O-ring. Then you'd grab your Hardline, you'd push it in gently until it's snug. You'd lower this one down, And then you secure the fitting in place, and there you would have a bit of hardline. Doesn't look like much at the moment, but give me some time and I might have learned the ropes. On the whole, I'd say that the process did go quite well, but I wasn't really entirely sure what to expect, and it was definitely a bigger workload than I was originally anticipating. What you're seeing now is a time lapse from around about 2 days, probably actually about 2.5, not because cutting and bending every tube took a long time, but because the learning curve was just so steep with this thing. I actually ended up redoing all of the tubes pretty much at least twice, because in order to actually get that really clean, perfect looking finish that you've probably seen in all of these other videos, you have to get every single part of the process right. And it's very easy to do 2 or 3 bends and then think to yourself, you know what, I'm going to go for gold, I'm going to do another one. And then unfortunately you end up melting the tube a little bit and then you have to throw the whole thing away. Or what happened with me a couple of times is that you either miscut it and then your hard work that you've spent an hour and a half on all has to be thrown away and you have to start again. Or you do a bend slightly wrong and then you have to fix it and then the whole thing just doesn't look quite as good as you wanted in the first place. This is exactly what happened with the bottom one. I was really proud of it at first because it had quite a lot of bends in and it seemed to fit in quite snugly, but then turning the PC round once everything was done, I then realised that actually it wasn't very straight at all, and if I just spent a little bit more time inspecting the computer from more angles, I would have saved myself the job of either accepting something that is a little bit subpar, or again, the time just to redo everything. You rejoin the action, I think, 3 days after we originally started this project. This has been simultaneously one of the most fun things I think I've done in this studio, if not the best. I've honestly really enjoyed all of my time making this, but it's easily been the hardest thing I think I've ever done really for PC Centric. I'm not sure whether you can see this, but all of these bits of tube here are cuts that did not, well, make the cuts. I don't think I can recommend one of these more. This is the Barrow pressure tester. It cost me around about £35. I had to express ship it here to get it in time. And essentially the idea with this, particularly with Hardline, is that you just plumb this into your loop, give it a bit of pressure, leave it for around about half an hour or so, and if the pressure in the loop actually remains the same, then in theory you shouldn't get any leaks, but if it starts to go down like it did many, many times, then you know that something in your loop isn't actually secure enough, and you would have had water coming out, but instead you just have air. We'll get some kitchen roll and actually place this underneath the computer, so if there are any leaks we can work out where they are. And the thing that puts me off so much about doing Hardline for my personal PC in around about a month's time is just the risks of leaks, I think, are so much higher than if you're using Softline. That's not to say that it is going to leak, but I think with Soft you have a little bit more certainty because you're not having to worry about having those really tight bends, whereas with this, it's pretty much anybody's guess. Let's fill this up with some distilled water and turn it on. No immediate signs of any spillages, which is a promising start. Power cycle it a few times, being really careful to make sure we don't actually run this dry. Here we have our custom Hardline liquid cooled loop actually moving. I definitely have overfilled it a little bit, but it's not really an issue because I was actually going to cleanse both the radiators and the piping anyway, because it is going to have a load of horrible bits of PVC in it. There's no way I could get rid of all of that. The downside for going for strong dyes in your system is that they will remain in your parts pretty much forever. This is from a previous purple build I did, and even though I flushed these out multiple times, you can see we've managed to collect a little bit of purple water that was once clear. And yes, this probably will stain our loop in the same way as our other purple colour, but I'm hoping not quite as much, as this is actually premix rather than a dye. That is really quite red actually. Give us some power. Oh yes, look at that. That was quick as well. You can really see it when it's red. Same again. Really does eat it up, doesn't it? You properly have to be on, off, on, off, on, and off. Is this going to be the one where we finally hit equilibrium? Yes! How about that? Do you want to see it with the paper towels removed and a lot more of the RGB on? I know you do. Here we go. Haven't properly leak tested this for an extended period of time, so I'm certainly hoping that it's not going to leak while I'm talking to you. But you can see it really does come alive. I'm sure that Corsair's RGB styling isn't going to appeal to everybody, but particularly off of the RAM actually, and you have all of those silver accents. As soon as you get a load of lighting in here, it does start to come alive because it reflects off each other, and it really does make it more intriguing, I guess, the more that you look at it. I think I'm going to do a separate video all about performance and setting this up the best it can be. As I said, I've spent 3 whole days on this thing, if not a little bit more at the moment, because it's, well, technically it's Wednesday today, so the video's going up today. It's actually midnight. And yes, it is a little bit rough around the edges, even though I redid this bottom tube. Looking at it from all of the normal angles, I don't think it's actually quite as attractive as I thought it was. But this was my first time doing this. There is a lot of room for improvement, but that is part of the fun, I guess. I am looking forward to the next time I actually am able to do one of these. Let me know your thoughts on this down below. I'm sure you have some. Hit subscribe for more videos just like this, including part 2. Smash the like button. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.